He was bigger than everyone. Bigger than Arnold, bigger than Sergio, bigger than Serge Nubret, and bigger than Frank Zane.
I seen a giant crowd gathered around, and it was one person standing in the middle of that crowd. And the closer I got to the person in the middle of the crowd, the bigger that got.
If you got to fight, you going a couple of punches is over.
Yeah.
But those rival guys, they couldn't handle the mess. They start carrying pistols.
That's the way it is.
Craig, Donnie Boy, Boo, and all them guys over there, the Avenues, they're the ones who helped East Side and West Side.
Because we contributed, with, the Crip started people.
Yeah.
And the Avenues, a burglar in my mama's house.
Before the Crips became a thing in the 70s, another gang ruled the streets, and they were known as the Avenue.
You formed the Avenues.
Yes.
Okay. Avenues before the Crips?
Yes.
Okay, now the Avenues predate the Crips.
Yes.
Behind it was a man who would later shape the origins of the Crips, Craig Monson. Monson, though, commanded respect effortlessly, and his name carried weight, even in whispers. Rumor has it that Craig used his influence to take down rival gangs, bringing a sense of order to the chaos going around. Without further words, let's dive into his story. Craig Monson's story begins on the rough streets of South Central Los Angeles during the classic physique era. Growing up in a challenging environment, Monson was known for his imposing physique and calm, reserved personality. But he wasn't just another kid trying to make it through tough circumstances. Monson was destined for greatness, and his journey to becoming a legend had only just begun.
And then one day, strolling down the Venice Beach boardwalk, I seen a giant crowd gathered around, and it was one person standing in the middle of that crowd. The bigger that got. And that was my whole perspective on weightlifting changed that day.
I was working out, 13 years old. I've been working, I'm 74 now, my birthday. I've had weights in my hand ever since then.
As a teenager, Monson found his way into the growing bodybuilding scene, seeking not only an outlet but a sense of strength and discipline through weightlifting.
Johnny Boy put the weights in my hand. I went over there to work out with him and Raymond. I was 13 years old. I'm the new kid in the neighborhood. I'm 13 and I'm like, whoa, look at this. I was developing my young body. And then when I hit puberty, 15, 16, I just took off.
It didn't take long for his dedication to pay off, as he soon began competing and making a name for himself in the world of bodybuilding. His physique was nothing short of awe-inspiring, even among the seasoned athletes who had been at it for years. But it wasn't just his muscles that made him stand out. It was his undeniable charisma and an unshakable spirit that left a lasting impression on anyone who crossed his path. However, life wasn't all about competitions and trophies. Monson was soon faced with the darker side of his world, and things were about to take a dramatic turn. In the late 1960s, Monson, like many young men of that era, got involved with the streets. As a wild teenager, he joined a local gang known as the Avenues, which had been established on a corner near 83rd and Hooper Avenue. This East Side clique held a reputation that garnered both fear and respect from outsiders and rival gangs.
No rivalry gangs, and nobody could handle us because we had knockout power. Wasn't no fights. We go to a party, you be dressed. We ain't gonna mess our stuff up. You ain't gonna scuffle your biscuits up.
Their influence was so strong that they were admired by young troublemakers in the neighborhood, including a young rebel named Raymond Washington who lived just a few blocks away. Washington wanted to be part of the Avenues, but Monson and Donnie Boy, the leaders of the gang, rejected his request.
I don't want to be in your gang no how. I'll start my own gang. And I said, what you gonna call it, you little Crip? Because of he was limping.
Yeah.
Not one to be discouraged, Washington decided to form his own small crew, which he called the Baby Avenues. This group, however, never really took off, and after being shunned by the original Avenues, the Baby crew dissolved as quickly as it had formed. But Washington wasn't done yet. By 1970, just a few years after this, Washington went on to create what would become one of the most notorious gangs in American history, the Crips. And that's where this story takes a significant turn. born.
And I said, what you gonna call it, you little Crip? Because he was limping, limping down the alley. And he said, that's what I'm gonna call it, the Crips. Just like that.
In 1969, another young man named Stanley Williams was making a name for himself as well. At just 15, Williams was arrested for car theft in Inglewood and sent to Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall in Downey. It was there that he was introduced to Olympic weightlifting by the facility's gym coach, sparking his interest in bodybuilding. By the time Williams was released in early 1971, at the age of 17, he had transformed his body, becoming noticeably bigger and stronger. When asked by the review board what his plans were after release, Williams famously responded that he intended to become the leader of the biggest gang in the world. Not long after his release, Williams crossed paths with Raymond Washington at Washington Preparatory High School. Washington had heard about Williams through a mutual friend who told him about Williams' toughness and his readiness to take on larger, more established gangs like the LA Brims and the Chain Gang. Williams himself admitted that his initial plan was to go after all the neighboring gangs, but in the process, the very same forces they had been fighting against began to consume them as well. And from there, the streets of Los Angeles would never be the same again. Williams once said that his goal in founding the Crips wasn't about wiping out other gangs, but rather about creating a powerful group that could protect the local black community from the rampant racism, police brutality, and corruption that was plaguing their neighborhoods. At the very beginning, there were just 3 Crip sets: Raymond Washington's East Side Crips, which later became known as the East Coast Crips, Williams' own West Side Crips, which evolved into the 8-Tray Gangster Crips, and the Compton Crips, which were led by a young guy named Mac Thomas. Williams used his street cred and his connections with various clique leaders on the West Side to form his Crip faction. Together, Williams, Washington, and Thomas launched a fierce and violent recruitment campaign that swept through the black neighborhoods of Los Angeles. They would challenge the leaders of other gangs to one-on-one street fights, and the outcome was often either the gang's defeat or its incorporation into the Crip organization. As more gangs gave in and joined the Crips, they turned from small independent cliques into branches of this growing and powerful force. Before long, the Crips had become the largest gang in South Central, both in terms of numbers and territory. However, not every gang was willing to lose their autonomy. These holdout groups banded together to form their own alliance, calling themselves the Bloods. They would go on to become the Crips' fiercest rivals, and Williams' old enemies, the LA Brims and the Chain Gang, joined this alliance, rebranding as the Brims and the Inglewood Family Bloods. Soon after the Crips were established, many of the original leaders either ended up dead or behind bars, and Williams quickly rose to become the gang's unofficial leader. In 1974, Raymond Washington was arrested for second-degree robbery and spent 2 years in prison. After his release, Washington was off, leaving Williams to take full command.
I saw Raymond Washington in Tracy. That's the prison we started. I saw Raymond in Tracy. Really? And then next day when I come home, I hear that he got
As the Crips continued to grow in power during the late 1970s, another major figure was drawn into the fold: Craig Monson. Known for his intimidating presence and natural leadership abilities, Monson soon became a key player within the Crips. His time with the gang was a striking contrast to his life as a disciplined bodybuilder. While the gym provided structure and focus, the streets were chaotic and violent. Monson somehow managed to walk this tightrope with a calm and collected demeanor that earned him respect both in the gym and on the streets. His reputation as a strong enforcer only grew, as he was known for settling disputes with sheer intimidation rather than resorting to outright violence. But as is often the case in the dangerous life of a gangster, Monson wasn't immune to the threats that came with the territory. Despite his involvement with the Crips, Monson didn't give up on his passion for bodybuilding. He competed in local amateur contests in and around Los Angeles, gaining recognition in the sport. But even as he pursued a future in bodybuilding, Monson's choices kept leading him down a dangerous path. Eventually, his criminal activities caught up with him. Monson faced a life-changing moment when an intruder returned to his mother's house. The burglar, though, had just been released from prison. Just days after being released from jail for a similar crime, the burglar was back at it, this time armed with a ball-peen hammer as he tore through Monson's mother's house. A fight broke out pretty quickly between the two, and although Monson took a blow to the head during the struggle, he managed to wrestle the hammer away from the intruder. In the heat of the moment, Monson turned the weapon on the man, which tragically led to his death.
burglar in my mama's house.
To Monson, this was nothing more than self-defense. He was protecting his home and his family, but the courts didn't see it that way. They charged and convicted him of involuntary manslaughter, and he ended up serving several years in San Quentin. Monson was no stranger to prison life. Throughout the 60s and 70s, his gang connections had him going in and out of the system regularly.
I went to juvenile hall. I went to camp for 6 months. I had a long history of going to jail because I was a bad boy.
But despite his turbulent past, a turning point came when Venice Beach became a hotspot for bodybuilders. Monson, known for his incredible strength, soon became a regular at Gold's Gym Venice Beach, where he started working out alongside legends like Arnold Schwarzenegger. His feats of strength drew huge crowds, with people gathering just to watch him lift.
And then one day, strolling down the Venice Beach boardwalk, I seen a giant crowd gathered around, and it was one person standing in the middle of that crowd. And that was just my whole perspective on weightlifting changed.
Monson's bench press was legendary. He could throw around 500 pounds for 10 reps and hit 585 pounds for 5 reps. And when it came to tricep extensions, he was lifting 225 pounds behind his neck like it was nothing. It wasn't long before Monson's lifting skills caught the eye of spectators, including Paco Arce, the vice president of Elizabeth Cosmetics, who just happened to be visiting Venice Beach one day. Arce, impressed by Monson's raw power, asked if he was still competing in bodybuilding. When Monson casually responded with "not anymore," Arce insisted that he compete in the Mr. World contest. Monson initially declined, saying he didn't qualify. But Arce wasn't taking no for an answer. He assured Monson that he could compete as an amateur and that he would personally sponsor him.
Opened my mailbox and I had a yellow envelope with all kind of stuff in it. Steroids. And an itinerary on how to take it.
At the time, Arce was living in Madrid, Spain, but he was so convinced of Monson's potential that he sent an itinerary and performance-enhancing supplements to prepare him for the competition. Monson was no stranger to enhancement drugs, having already been using them under the guidance of well-known bodybuilding doctor in LA. Now, with Arce's backing, Monson started to really ramp up his regimen. It didn't take long for his physique to explode. He became a mass monster practically overnight, training hard at City Gym in LA. Before he knew it, Monson was on a flight to compete in the Mr. World Amateur Contest, with his accommodations all taken care of by Arce. Once there, Monson started building a solid fan base. His presence on stage was electrifying, and even though he was a newcomer, people were already cheering for him. Surprisingly, he ended up losing to his roommate, a French contestant he had just met at the hotel. Monson placed 5th overall, but he left the stage feeling satisfied because the crowd had been so supportive. It was clear that he had already made an impact.
When I stepped on that stage in Geneva, Switzerland, they rushed the stage.
I think I heard about this.
Yes.
After the competition, Monson stuck around the venue and fans flocked to him. He set up a table in the auditorium, selling signed photos, and before long, he was surrounded by a lot of people wanting his autograph. By the end of the night, Monson had already sold out of every photo he had brought with him. The ushers were blinking the lights, signaling the end of the event, but the crowd was still lingering, unwilling to leave while Monson was still there, soaking in the attention from his newfound fans. When Monson returned to the US, he had built quite a few connections from his trip. One memorable event was an invitation from the DJ who had performed at his last competition. The DJ invited Monson to compete in a show called Night of the Crystal in London, promising it would be an all-expenses-paid trip. When Monson arrived at the airport, he was shocked to see massive banners with his picture plastered everywhere. The banners boldly proclaimed, "First time in London, Craig Monson competing at the Night of the Crystal London," and even read "Bigger than the Hulk." It was a surreal moment for Monson, who had become a sensation. What made Monson so unique was not just his enormous size as a bodybuilder, but the fact that he was insanely strong too, a rare combination in the bodybuilding world. He wasn't just big for show. His legendary strength stories from the 70s are still talked about today, but the next decade brought unexpected challenges. By the mid-1980s, Monson had reached the height of his fame in the bodybuilding world. He was often seen cruising around Hollywood in limousines or Mercedes-Benz cars, mingling with the elite at private parties and nightclubs. "Everybody wants to be seen with the big man," Monson once said, and he wasn't wrong. People were eager to pick him up in fancy cars and party all night with him. But along with the glitz and glamour, Monson also picked up something far darker: the drug habits of the crowd he was rolling with.
Yep.
The drugs have changed the people so dramatically.
This was during the turbulent 1980s when the coke epidemic was sweeping across the country under President Reagan's administration. Powdered coke was especially common among the wealthy as it was an expensive drug found in the luxurious neighborhoods. But when someone figured out how to turn it into a cheaper, more potent substance called crack, it spread like wildfire through poorer communities. It was like a biblical plague. Crack coke devastated Black and Latino neighborhoods, destroying lives and families in its path. Coke didn't care about status or race. It was an equal opportunity destroyer, trapping everyone from Hollywood execs to everyday people in its grip. Monson, once the mighty Monson, who could lift insane amounts of weight, soon found himself lifting and snorting powdered coke by the gram. The drug had such a hold on him that he abandoned bodybuilding altogether for over 6 years, sinking into a deep depression. Eventually, Monson realized he needed help. He sought out rehab, a decision that cost him over $4,000 and required a stay at a drug treatment center in LA. It wasn't easy, but after a long struggle, Monson finally managed to kick his addiction and get his life back on track. In 1996, at the age of 46, Monson finally made his return to the gym after a long break. His body had changed a lot during his hiatus. He had lost a significant amount of weight, muscle mass, and strength. But determined to rebuild, he joined a nearby gym and slowly began the journey of getting back into shape. He had also distanced himself from the Hollywood crowd that had led him astray, finding work at a local club called Dublin's, just a few blocks away from the gym. Though Monson hadn't touched free weights in years, he had kept up with a home routine of push-ups and bodyweight exercises, which kept him in decent enough condition to make a solid comeback. After only 3 weeks of hitting the gym again, Monson's muscles responded quickly to the workouts. One day, to test his strength, his training partner Pete spotted him as Monson attempted to bench 315 pounds. What made this moment special was that 315 pounds was the very same weight Monson had once used for triceps extensions years ago. With each rep, Pete counted out loud. Monson had managed to bench press 315 pounds 50 times. Even though Pete had counted every rep, he couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Monson was on his way back. Around 2003, Monson began experimenting with growth hormones to boost his size and strength. It worked. He saw gains that brought him back to his former glory in terms of strength. But like many things in life, it came with a price. While training one day, a friend snapped a photo of him and Monson noticed something alarming in the picture. There was a strange imprint on the back of his head, almost as if his brain was pushing against his skull. Horrified, he realized that this abnormality was likely caused by the growth hormones he had been using. Without hesitation, Monson decided to stop using them. Then, in late 2016, Monson faced another challenge. He was hospitalized and had to undergo surgery to remove his gallbladder. This setback kept him away from the gym, and during his recovery, Monson watched as his muscles started to shrink and his skin sagged from the rapid weight loss. But he wasn't one to give up. After several months of healing, his doctor gave him the green light to start working out again, but only with light weights and stretching. Gradually, Monson rebuilt his strength. Before long, he was packing on muscle again, showing his relentless dedication to self-improvement. Monson's story is one of transformation and resilience. Despite his infamous past, he broke free from the chains of gang life and redirected his focus towards bodybuilding and personal growth. He often reflected on how the streets shaped him, but he never let them define him. Monson's journey stands as an example of how someone can rise above their past and forge a new path in life. Today, Craig Monson's legacy is a mix of street legend, athletic accomplishments, and personal reinvention. He represents both the dangers of gang life and the incredible power of self-determination. His feats of strength are still well known, with several videos of his workout days posted online showing a glimpse of his glory days. Monson remains a symbol of change, strength, and the enduring ability to rebuild and redefine oneself. There you have it. Please subscribe.